I've been working with sound forever because I also do sound design for films, among other things. I've been working on sound incrementally and step by step. So the earlier installations or the earlier works were simpler ideas. So first silence, and then I tied that with like cinema and nature. I think all of those elements that I worked with before, they're all still here. As I started to integrate sound into my practice, I think it started taking over because to combine everything that I've been working with, it needed to be more dynamic. So I think I needed space, I needed objects, I needed to start. And also because sound is it's a tactile material. We don't see it, but it really occupies space. So it made sense to expand it into to this wider, and I didn't want the limits anymore of like how I used to work. So I think that's how it's evolving. People really don't see sound as a physical thing. It's because we don't see it, but it always occupies space. And so even when I was working with films, I was always very mindful of how sound occupies space. And so I was really interested and excited in seeing how I can explore that, how I can play with that. And so I think when I make works that have sound, I don't just think of them as individual pieces, but I also think of them as parang different tracks of a soundtrack, and then I have to make sure that they all work together, the sound as well as whatever it is you see. So it's the first time I'm doing that, and it's the first time I decided, okay, I mean, when in the beginning of thinking about this show, I had a lot of other works, and it felt like it was in between having art objects or wall pieces. I still had that, but then as I explored the concept and the idea more, I cut out a lot of the fat and just stuck with the 4 pieces you see here. I spent 6 weeks in Umbria under the Civitella Ranieri Fellowship. So it was a 6-week program. I was there to research silence, or at least I was intending to either make work or explore silence because it was located in this kind of remote place. It was a castle in Italy. And then I left for a 6 months fellowship under the Asian Cultural Council. It was the New York Fellowship. So I was there to research about sound art as public art. And I guess from spending that much time there, I saw a lot of exhibitions. I went to a lot of performances, and I got to meet artists and talk to them about their practice also in relation to sound. And when I was there, I also took like a 5-day intensive gong workshop, like a gong and sound healing workshop. In this exhibition, I talk about the solfeggio frequencies. I think in the past works, I was dealing with them one by one. So one frequency, what one means, what its supposed effects are. And so the work in Lubi is one of those frequencies, so 417. At the same time, the narrative in my head for the Lubi Art project is kind of similar. I have a narrative of what it would be like for when everything fails. How do we produce that sound, right? And so when I talk about a rapture ideology in this show, I think that's how it's also related. There is that narrative of if all else fails, how can I produce this sound? And at the same time, yun nga, alluding still to the solfeggio frequencies and sound as a healing modality or as a healing tool. I've always been interested in cults, in religion, and fandoms. I think it's a product of the times because it feels like all of us are part of our own little cults. And at the same time, I'm interested in how fervently people are convinced of whatever it is they choose to believe in, that um, and that it affects all of us in different ways. Eventually, I come to the question of, if I had to build my own cult or my own religion or my own system of belief or faith, what would be the idea that I can get behind? What would be the idea I want everyone to understand or to believe in also? But at the same time, I don't, because part of the problem I feel is that everyone's constantly asserting their truth to each other, and that gets us all in trouble and causes chaos and confusion and disagreements. And I think that's the mess we are in today. And so I really thought about silence, because before you can even get any idea across, before you can even acquire any kind of knowledge or understanding of anything, it's necessary to put yourself in a state of silence. We're so constantly inundated by or bombarded by information or somebody else's truth telling you to hate someone, like someone, believe in this, buy this, do that, like this, hate that. So I think I just want to cut the influence away and just bring back parang self-governance or independence of thought. And that only happens when there's no other influence, when there's just like you alone with yourself. This is called All Seven. So it's composed of seven subwoofers made up of paper mache, and they're made of layers of dictionary, like old dictionary pages. Each one is playing 45s, a vinyl record. The vinyl record is playing the dead wax, meaning the silent part of a record. There's seven pieces, seven different records. They're discarded records, and they're just playing on a loop. To me, I always start with this because so when I stumbled on that phrase, which was the idea, or I read about the idea of ethical cults, this writer says that each cult starts with a rapture ideology, meaning for any religion or any cult to exist, you have to start with the idea of something collapsing or something ending or something or some sort of destruction in the beginning, so that you can convince people that you need salvation or you need some sort of solution. You present a problem first, big unsolvable problem, so that you give the solution later on. Anyway, so for this piece, for me, my rapture ideology was the idea of the collapse of meaning, collapse of language, or the failure of language to do what we used to rely on it to do, which is communicate with each other, understand each other, make meaning. Yeah. That work is called Toning 1 to 9. And they are made up of, it's made up of 9 fountains. Each fountain is playing each of the solfeggio frequencies. At the same time, there's like a loop of water, it's a fountain. This work alludes to the holy water fonts you see in churches. So parang I wanted to kind of augment that idea, because to me it felt like a stagnant, it's a stagnant small body of water that we all come into, like a place of worship we come in, and I wanted to allude to that at least. And then I was also thinking, in researching about the show, I was also researching about radio history and also alternative healing practices. And I just have this very distinct sound memory of me as a child in my lola's house, and she would be listening to this guy on the radio close to midnight, and his name is Johnny Midnight, and he used to make his listeners put a glass of water in front of the speakers. And then he will do like a chanting. And supposedly after his ritual, you can drink, the listeners can drink that water, and he has turned that water into a healing water, or water that heals. What he used to call that was toning or toning. So I wanted to do that. So that's why each of the fountain has a solfeggio frequency. So instead of chanting, I wanted to use the frequencies to kind of touch the water, or the sound blessing the water, kind of infusing it supposedly with like good energy. So that's the idea of the work. This one, there are 4 magic lanterns. Each magic lantern is projecting a photograph of the ocean or a body of water. So they're all aligned to the horizon line. The work is called 4 Magic Lanterns after composition 1916 number 10. So I also kind of started reading about the work of Lamont Young and his instructional piece called Composition 1960 number 10, which just states draw a straight line and follow it. So what I wanted to do was draw a straight line using the horizon line. Because to me, as a sound engineer, I stare at waveforms all day in the computer. And to me, that a straight line means silence, that there's no sound. So I wanted to allude to that. But at the same time, it's a very peaceful, quiet, visual thing, the idea of a horizon in a calm body of water. Also, I wanted to make magic lanterns because of the old phantasmagoric theater idea. In other words, proto-cinema before the moving image. They used to have these phantasmagoric shows where they would have horror shows and project images and have smoke effects and electricity to kind of elicit awe and horror from the audience. So I like that idea because in my head it feels like I'm trying to make an apparition out of these images. And at the same time, the magic lanterns so each one is fitted with a 40 hertz bulb, and this bulb flickers at a certain rate that's supposed to be stimulating your gamma brain waves. So it also claims to improve memory, cognitive function, and focus. So I wanted to put all of those ideas together. Lastly, it's 14 stations. There are 14 radio transmitters, and each one is playing a different audio loop of a seascape, the soundscape of a beach or an ocean. So each transmitter will show a number, and that is whatever is the unoccupied radio frequency. So you can tune your radio to that number. If you have a digital radio, you just look for the corresponding number within the area. Of course, we have a limited range. Or you can just like turn the tuning dial and eventually find. To me, this is kind of my idea, where after you go through the exhibition, or after you have come to understand conceptually what this is about, this is like my idea of evangelization, because radio, it's alluding to pirate radio and taking over empty airwaves. So I have this image, or I have this thought that, anyone who's just scanning through all these frequencies in between all the chaos and all the information overload you get from these radio broadcasts and news and music and everyone's opinions on the radio, that you will kind of stumble into, a quiet sound of the ocean, like a break from all of that. And also, I'm interested in this kind of invisibility. For instance, with the radios, what's radio really but like a conversion of sound into electrical signals, and it's here. It's around us. We're surrounded by it, but we don't see it. And I thought that was also interesting that there is already this kind of force that's present that we don't see, and we're walking amongst it. And we figured out a way to both broadcast and receive that into a medium that we can understand or that we can perceive. I think it's the first time that I really decided that I'm gonna put sound front and center. I wanted to see how I can commit to the idea of sound as a conceptual basis of the work, not just as medium or material, but also explore sound conceptually